Welcome back to yet another live edition on your favorite sports updates channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. I'm happy to be back. Good to be back. It's 33 minutes past 10 a.m. down here in Kampala, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. Sorry about that interruption. I don't know. Some people, I don't even know what to say. Somebody knows that you do something. It's a routine thing that you do, and then they pretend like they do not know it's happening. You know, it's sheer pretense. It's sheer pretense, in my opinion. So, really, for me, anyways, it is what it is. Allow me have our audience tested. Make sure everything does check out before we continue. Because today morning we're going to be discussing Manchester City, among other things. Have Manchester City fallen off the wagon? How will they be able to bounce back? So that will be the gist of our topic as of this morning. And yeah, but it's good to be back. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. The reason as to why I choose Manchester City is because of their start to the season. It has not been pretty. We all know that. And will it get better? There are no signs that it won't. However, if early signs are anything to go by, then you might not be that very much encouraged if you're a Manchester City fan. And basically, that's just what it is. So I wanted us to digest that and see what it means for Manchester City. Will Pep Guardiola be able to get Man City back to winning ways, and not just winning ways, perhaps dominant ways, the kind of dominancy we saw Manchester City in his first, 8 years or thereabout. So that's going to be the gist of the conversation. I'm just trying to, check on a few things here and there to make sure, everything is well tested. Anyways, okay, okay. So yeah, that will be the. But I want to say thank you so much, LFC, for always being part of our broadcasts. And Michifan, all our usual suspects, the regular suspects, the semi-regular. A lot of you guys have disappeared on me in the last couple of days. But for some, I understand it's because of school. For others, it's because of work. When summer sort of comes to an end or to a climax, these things are bound to happen. These things are bound to happen. People get back to more rigorous routines. Others go back to school and things like that. Hi Shumail, how are you? It's been a minute. How have you been? I hope you're doing okay. No, I hope you're doing okay. So this morning, like I said, we're going to be discussing Manchester City, what's to come for Manchester City, where are they at the moment? Is there a reason for concern? Do we have cause for concern about Manchester City? Um, because it's not going to be an easy season, that I must say. And like I said, it's not been a pretty start to the season. Did you see German lose? German, I did not watch the game, but yeah, they lost, and I mean that I do not think any of us would have seen that kind of result coming on any given day, because it's not like they were playing the best of opponents or the toughest of opponents to lose on the day. But I mean, German losing to Slovakia, it's not the kind of result one would expect from you. But yeah, in football is like that. Sometimes they are outliers. There are those kinds of results that come and none of you expects them, or none of us expects them. And it was typically that. Particularly, I, for one, yesterday, I did not think that Uganda Cranes were going to beat up against Mozambique by 4 goals to nil, while they had a chance, given that they were at home, that they would win. Maybe a 2-1, a 2-0 goal margin would have sufficed. But scoring four, that was a new Uganda Cranes in the face. So, yeah, that's what I would say about Germany. And initially, I thought maybe they had not fielded the best of teams or the strongest of teams, but I mean, it was a strong team. Joshua Kimmich, Angelo Stiller, it had Leon Gostka, it had Nick Voltmada of Voltmed, it was a bit of a strong side. It had Sergi Gnabry, so in one or the other, I thought, yeah, it's just what it is. They underperformed. They did not deliver on the day. Anyways, back to the gist of today's conversation. Manchester City. Have Manchester City fallen off? By majority of signs, you could say yes, they are falling off, but they haven't fallen so far off. Now, the challenge is, or the reason as to why we're asking it that way is because we are used to Manchester City being almost near perfect, that any slip up is viewed as something unexpected, as something very odd, particularly last season. And we know that last season wasn't the best of Premier League seasons. If anything, if any of the previous Premier League seasons are anything to go by, we did not hit the 90 point mark. I mean, it's one that will not hit for now. I think uh, uh, we've only hit it once out of the last 3 seasons, and that was, I think, the 2023-2024 season, because Manchester City won the Premier League title with a tally of 91 points. But the season prior to that, they had won it at 89 points. So last season, Liverpool winning it at 84 points, and Arsenal coming second with 74 points, with Manchester City behind them at 71 points. Again, Man City finishing third at 71 points with just 3 points behind the second place team isn't the most wild of things. But like I said, by their own measure of standards, they've fallen far off. I mean, we're talking about the Manchester City side who in 2017, 2018 won the Premier League title with a tally of 100 points. Then the subsequent season, which was 2018-2019, they won that Premier League title by 98 points, with Liverpool coming second at 97 points. Then in 2021-2022, they won the Premier League title with a tally of 93 points, Liverpool coming second at 92 points. So that's the kind of standard or bar so high that they set for themselves, that anything less than what we have seen particularly in last season, is believed to be an underachievement. You remember in 2019-2020 when Liverpool won the Premier League title, they had a tally of 99 points, and Manchester City came second at 81 points. Everybody thought they had fallen off, and indeed, by their own standards, had fallen off a bit. But Liverpool were just immaculate that season, because I think they lost only one Premier League game. So when you look back at what Manchester City were last season, of course, we know in the Champions League they did not do well. They got knocked out at the first round of playoffs because they didn't finish within the top 8, and they finished in the top 24. I think, was it around 23rd or something? And they got knocked out, by Real Madrid, I think. So they get knocked out, and then in the Premier League, things were not happening for them. Things were just not happening for them, and by saying that they were just not happening for them, is you have to look at the point study, the number of games that they did lose in the previous campaign, and it wasn't okay. It was below standard. It was below standard. I mean, they lost as many as 9 games. When was the last time you had Manchester City lose 9 Premier League games? When was the last time you saw Manchester City draw 8 games? Because they had 21 wins, by the way. 1 win more than Arsenal had managed, because Arsenal managed 20. Arsenal had so many draws, as many as 14. So you say Manchester City need Kai Havertz, really? Or is that their solution? Well, but given that they lost 9 Premier League games, given that they finished third, it's a follow. It's a follow. If we are being honest, because they were coming from the backdrop of winning 4 Premier League titles consecutively, something that no other Premier League team has ever done. And yes, when you have a team like that, when you have a project like that wins for 4 consecutive years, it's going to reach a point where it falls off. It's going to reach a point of satiety. For those that know a little bit about economics, it's going to get to that point, and it's and reach a point of diminishing marginal returns. That curve is going to begin falling off. And I think for Manchester City, we are seeing that curve falling off. We are seeing it from the start of last season. And then we get into this season, and 3 games played, they've only won one of those games. They beat up against Wolverhampton Wanderers on the opening day of the Premier League, or the opening weekend, by 4 goals to 0, and we thought Manchester City are back. And if anything, given the amount of resources that they invested in the transfer window earlier before going out to the Club World Cup, and before the close of the transfer window, bringing in players like Tijani Reinders, Ryan Cheki, Ryan Atinori, Marcus Bentinelli, the goalkeeper from Chelsea. Now they've added on James Trafford, Gianluigi Donnarumma, all those are goalkeepers. That's a brilliant, signing. You go back to January, they brought in Kushanov, Nico Gonzalez, Omar Mamouche, they brought in Victor Reis. This one has been sent out on loan to Girona, and things like that. So I knew, for one, that Manchester City had embarked on a project of rebuild. They are in the period of transition. They have been in a period of transition, by the way. Even when they won the 2023-2024 campaign, they had already started their transition. Moving on players like Riyad Mahrez, meant that it's going to be a new iteration, bringing in the Jeremy Dokus of this world. We know that players like Joao Cancelo, players like Emerick Laporte had left the club, and now players like Kevin De Bruyne, players like Kyle Walker, players like Ilkay Gundogan, players like Ederson Moraes have all been moved on, and as we speak, the speculation that Trabzonspor could sign Stefan Ortega, at Trabzonspor over there in Turkey. So you look at all that, that's, a huge turnover, and they need to move on from players like Calvin Phillips and etc. Not that Calvin Phillips has been a major stay, but sooner or later, you envision that Bernardo Silva will be leaving the club, the likes of Mateo Kovacic. So it's going to be a tumultuous kind of transition. It's going to be a bit turbulent for those that enjoy the Manchester City flight, but losing 3 games at the start of the season, because on match day 2, they lost to Tottenham Hotspurs by 2 goals to 0, and then subsequently on match day 3, they did lose to Brighton and Hove Albion by 2 goals to 1. Now, while their first half looked promising in itself for that game against Brighton, their second half performance was far from convincing. It wasn't good. It didn't look good at all. And when you look at the statistics, yes, they dominated possession, as you would expect Manchester City, 565 passes, but 87% passing accuracy. And you look at their fouls, 14 fouls for Manchester City, but shots on target were as few as 3, while Brighton had 7, And that's out of the total of 12 shots on goal by either side. But you can see that sharpness, that accuracy, brought Erling Haaland scored their Manchester City's goal in that game before James Milner scored a penalty, and then Brajan Bruder did score in the 89th minute to win it for Fabian Hartelaar's side. Now, the second half performance in itself was far from convincing. It was really, really wanting. But Erling Haaland, they couldn't get really much him on the ball, So it has pointed us to a kind of picture that Manchester City could be on another continuous trajectory. Because when you look at the Premier League, the competition is not going to get any lesser. Liverpool have strengthened. Yes, they were the champions last season. They further strengthened their squad because bringing in Alexander Isak, bringing in Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kakez, and all those players, Georgi Mamadashvili, Giovan Lioni, the young defender. It's not to say that Liverpool are trying to be weaker. They are strengthened. You look at Arsenal, we know what they brought in as many as 8 signings. Ebeleche Eze, Martin Zubimendi, Noni Madueke, Christian Mosquera, Christian Nogard, all those. Arsenal are getting stronger. You look at Chelsea have equally strengthened. Liam Dillon, Joao Pedro, William Estaval, Jamie Gittens, Facundo Benanote, Alejandro Garnacho. All these are players that have been brought in to further strengthen and already strong Chelsea. We know that they've had a massive exodus of players, but they needed to do that because they are more like an asset management firm. If you have an underperforming asset, move it on for better things. That's why players like Kanare Chukwemeka, Leslie Wogochuku, Amando Broja, and among others have been moved on. Kepa Arrizabalaga, Noni Madueke have been sold off to bring in revenue. But You go to now. You go to a team like Newcastle. Yes, they did not have the best of transfer windows, if we are being honest, but they brought in Johan Wissa, they brought in Nick Boltmada, they brought in Anthony Elanga, they brought in Aaron Ramsdale, they brought in Malik Theo, the defender from AC Milan, and they are strengthening because they want to continuously remain competitive. Remember, Chelsea finished fourth last season. They want to aim higher. So Manchester City ready to compete and finish higher than Chelsea. Newcastle are going to be fighting to finish higher than Fifi, where they did finish last season. Nottingham Forest, who ended up finishing seventh, with Aston Villa being sixth. They've equally strengthened for Nottingham Forest. They have a broader squad. Yes, it is partly because they are going to be featuring in Europe, playing in the UEFA Europa League, but also it means that they want to remain competitive in the Premier League. Their head of football or global football at Nottingham Forest, Edu Gaspar Dawood, superintended a very, very successful transfer window in which they brought in players like Douglas Luiz, Danny Ndoye, James McAtee from Manchester City. They brought in Omari Hudson, although he's been omitted from their Europa League squad. Omari Hudson from Ipswich Town. They brought in, a couple of other players. They managed to retain Morgan Gibbs-White. For me, I looked at that as a new signing in itself. Ola Aina was handed a new contract. They are discussing, I think, new contracts for Callum Wilson. It hasn't already been done. So you look at all of that, and teams are preparing to be competitive. Teams are preparing to give others a run for their money. You look at AFC Bournemouth. Yes, they've had massive exodus, especially within their backline, as well as a forward player in Dango Ouattara, who has left to join Brentford. You look at Dean Howson leaving. You look at Ilya Zabani leaving the club. You look at Milan Shkakes, leaving the club. But they have further strengthened that squad. They brought in, what's his name? Adrian Trafford, who replaced, Milos Kakes at left back. They brought in players like what's his name? I'm forgetting. Ben Doak from Liverpool, again, to further strengthen that side. It's the idea is they brought in George Petrovic, the goalkeeper from Chelsea. Hi LFC, good to have you back as always. Players like Bafode Diakite, the defender, and then Alex Jimenez from AC Milan on loan. Now, okay, it's further to strengthen to try and remain competitive. Adil from Bayer Leverkusen was also brought in. So can't stay, have to get a bus to my rugby match. Okay, we wish you the best of luck in your rugby match. So you look at all that, and teams are strengthening. So that means that if Manchester City continue on this kind of trajectory, they are in for a long, long run because their opponents are not becoming any lesser opponents. We know that at Tottenham Hotspur, with a new manager in Thomas Frank, yes, it may not be as glory as it was for the 2016-2017 season when Chelsea won the Premier League title at about, was it 93, 94 points under Antonio Conte, and Tottenham Hotspur finished second at 86 points. They may not going to have that season, but they are going to remain competitive. They are going to be a better team in the Premier League than they were last season. In any case, we've already seen signs of that. They beat Burnley on the opening day by 3-0, beat Manchester City themselves by 2-0 on match day 2 before losing to AFC Bournemouth on match day 3. Now, yes, they're going to be competing in the UEFA Champions League as well, but they have a decent squad. They brought in players like Rando Kolomwani on loan from PSG. They brought in Xavi Simons. They brought in Muhammad Kudus. Those are brilliant signings. Of course, they made the deal for Matthias Tel's permanent and things like that. So when you look at the structure of play, when you look at how Thomas Frank has been able to organize them in the 2 months he's been with them, it looks like really, really decent. Are they going to lose some games? Yes, they will lose some games, like pretty much the manager acknowledged. But if we have to compare all these opponents to Manchester City, who we think are continuing to follow off, can they stay within the mold? Because for Manchester City, for me, it's not about them winning the title or winning the Premier League, the Champions League title. No, it's Manchester City remaining within the creme de la creme of the Premier League, remaining second, remaining third, oscillating within those positions to then ready them for their bounce back, to glory, because rebuilding a team or the reconstruction of a team, we know that takes a bit of time. We know that that doesn't come as quickly as we may have it. You have to go back to Jurgen Klopp when he had just walked into Liverpool around October 2015. I mean, it took him time to win silverware. They were reaching cup finals, including the UEFA Europa League, I think in 2016 when they lost to Sevilla. They were reaching cup finals, but they were losing out until you get to 2018-2019 season when they win the UEFA Champions League, and then the subsequent season they win the Premier League title. There's a time they won the domestic treble, the FA Cup, I think the Carling Cup or Carabao Cup or EFL Cup, as well as I think the Charity Shield. So you look at all that, and it took a bit of time to build. Now for Pep Guardiola, one would think that for the genius of a manager that he is, it shouldn't take him ages to rebuild a team, to reconstruct a team. But when you look at the players that are being replaced for others, they're not pound for pound, they're not the same. As good as Tijani Reinders, yet, I mean, we cannot compare him to Kevin De Bruyne. As good as Tijani Reinders is, as good as Jeremy Doku is, or want him to be, we cannot compare him to Riyad Mahrez, or Omar Mamouche. We cannot compare them to Riyad Mahrez. For me, I believe Riyad Mahrez was a much better player. When you look at Joao Cancelo, ever since they let go of Joao Cancelo, they've not had a good right back. Yes, Rico Lewis sometimes does the job, but predominantly we've seen them play there. Matheus Nunes, is it working? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. When you lose a player like Emerick Laporte, yes, they've also moved on Manuel Akanji, I think to Inter Milan, and then you look at all that and think to yourself, there's bound to be a decline in terms of overall performance. Even though you still have John Stones, you have Ruben Diaz, you have Kushano, you have Joshko Vadiol, you have Nathan Ake, who remains a target for other teams and things like that. So really, you look at it in that sense and think to yourself, is this how it is going to be? Although I don't know, for the movement sheet, that deal for Manuel Akanji has not yet been confirmed for the exists. But in any case, what are we trying to say? You look at their squad. Again, Logi Donnarumma is a very, very good goalkeeper. That is without a doubt. But is he as good as Ederson Moraes? I think you would say that, but Ederson Moraes, for a goalkeeper that plays predominantly with his feet, is a much, much better fit for that. And that's why PSG have equally decided to move on Gianluigi Donnarumma and go for Lucas Tavernier from Lille, because they believe, because Luis Enrique, who is not different a manager from Pep Guardiola in terms of style of play or how they want to go about the game, but they want that, better ball playing goalkeeper. So perhaps it gives them the advantage. We know that Ederson Moraes was the goalkeeper with the most assists, and as far as the Premier League is concerned, you look at Rodri, is Rodrigo Cascante still the same player that he was before he suffered that anterior cruciate ligament injury? He's yet to get back that, very top, that very best. He's not yet there. He's yet to bounce back. You look at now all the goalkeeping department is almost fresh. Is almost new. James Trafford, very good goalkeeper, still a youngster, only 22 years of age, returning back, coming in from Burnley, and then you have Marcus Bettinelli, who you may not even mention because I doubt he'll get a lot of game time, joining in from Chelsea. They brought in Ryan Atnoy, very good left back. I think they're covered in that role. You look at their midfield, the point is going to be, what is going to be Pep Guardiola's mainstay of selection? Is it going to be Tijani Reinders alongside Nico Gonzalez, or is it going to be Tijani Reinders alongside Rodrigo Cascante? And who is going to be the third wheel in that midfield? Is it going to be Bernardo Silva? Is it going to be Mateo Kovacic? Is it going to be Phil Foden? I mean, they have the numbers. Is it going to be Ryan Cherki? They have the numbers in terms of the plans. But the organization to get that team that clicks, to get that midfield that you rely on. For example, you go back to Kevin De Bruyne and Rodri, as well as Phil Foden. That clicked. Whether you pulled out Foden and got in Bernardo Silva, that clicked. Now, at the moment, this one has not yet clicked. Against Wolves, it did click. It did click. And going into that game against Tottenham Hotspur, although my own prediction had been a draw, I told you that I do expect Pep Guardiola to tinker with his team. And guess what? He decided to bring Nico Gonzalez, Tijani Reinders, and Bernardo Silva. Jeremy Doku started in that game. Sorry, started. That's the midfield that started in the Wolves game. And Jeremy Doku started alongside Oscar Bob and brought Erling Haaland. Up front. So that was the composition of team that started. But when you go back to the team that started in up against Tottenham Hotspur, that midfield was changed. He had Nico Gonzalez, he had Tijani Reinders, Oscar Bob, Ryan Cheki, Omar Mamush, brought Erling Haaland. So you can see that Bernardo Silva had been pulled out of that. Jeremy Doku had been pulled out. Now, this does not build you consistency. I feel that Manchester City need a certain level of consistency with the particular team in the composition of that midfield for them to click back, for Tijani Reinders to trust that when I'm playing with Nico Gonzalez, this is our kind of movement. When I play with Ryan Cheki or Phil Foden, this is what we have. When I'm playing with Bernardo Silva, he needs to have a certain trust that these are the main players that I'm going to be playing with week in, week out, for them to formulate that bit of partnership. The same way you have, for example, at Arsenal, you've had previously, you have Thomas Partey, Martin Odegaard, and Declan Rice. They had formed their composition, knowing how they go about their movements. Now Arsenal themselves are having to adapt to this new midfield. Of course, you could say that Martin Odegaard and Declan Rice are still the same players, but a very, very crucial role in Martin Zubimendi's deep line number 6 is a new figure, that they need to get adapted to, who has fitted in right well. So for a team like Manchester City, I believe that they will need that bit of consistency. And when you go to the game against Brighton, how did they start in midfield? Now the same one, it was Rodri, it was Tijani Reinders, and Bernardo Silva. Then Oscar Bob returned, Omar Mamush, and brought Erling Haaland. So you can see. And then you go to the back line, he changed, he got Ruben Diaz and brought in Koshanov to play alongside James Stones, Ryan Atnori, and Matthias Nunes. You remember previously he had Rico Ruiz playing at right back. Now he's shifted to Nunes. So that sort of a quick iteration of players is one that is going to trouble Manchester City in the short and long run if Pep Guardiola is going to persist with it. We know that he's good at rotating players and he knows at the right time to do it. But usually early on into the season, now it's equally challenging because you have new players who are trying to adapt and learn a new system, a new way of playing, and get accustomed to playing with other players. It's hard to zero down to a consistent team. But Pep Guardiola needs to understand that this is my spy. The way I brought Erling Haaland is guaranteed in that team is how every other role is supposed to be. Now, at the moment, you cannot guarantee anything because you could wake up and it's Koshanov, Josko Vardiol, Rico Reis are playing in that team and Ryan Atnori or somebody else, So in that midfield, you could wake up and Tijani Reinders is not starting. So he needs to nail down a starting 11 that he relies on for majority of his games. I'm not saying rotation is bad, it's always good, but you need to have that core composition of the team, for which others just come in and fit it, that kind of sense. So without it, I do feel personally that Manchester City may continue to struggle. Now, when they return from the international break, the September international break, they're going to have a bit of a difficult run of fixtures until the first weekend of October before we break off for another international break. Because when they return, they play at home against Manchester United. We know that Manchester United are not strangers to going to the Etihad Stadium and beat up against Manchester City. They're not strangers to that. They can't go there and beat up against Manchester City. They've done it before. I think last season they went there and beat them by 2-1. It's something that they've done before. They can't do it again. For everything that Manchester City sort of struggle with, apologies, for anything that Manchester United may struggle with, beating up against the big boys is not usually a big headache. They may not always win, but at least they will pick a result off of you, and that's usually a very, very crucial So that's why that fixture is really, really, really important. And for me, I feel that it does come a little too early for Manchester City because one, you're struggling, you've lost the opening two of your three fixtures. The last thing you want is go back to the Etihad Stadium and lose, and lose again. That's the last thing you want against your direct rival. And after playing Manchester United, that will be on Sunday 14th, up against Manchester United. The subsequent Thursday of the following week, they will be up against Napoli at the same ground in the UEFA Champions League. Napoli is no easy opponent. They are the champions of the Scudetto. They are the reigning champions of the Italian Serie A. Then, after that, you go to September 21st, which will be possibly, will it be a Monday? It will be a Sunday, Now you play on a Thursday, and I do not know why this has been the case. How do you make a team like Man City, even though they are going to be playing at home? You play them, they play Man United on a Sunday, they play on a Thursday. Why shouldn't they playing on a Wednesday or Tuesday? Okay, at least a Wednesday. I have issues with that because then they play on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, for which they have to play and travel to Arsenal. So you can see it's going to be a difficult one of result, games. Then they will have a bit of a breather the subsequent week on the 24th of September when they make the trip to Huddersfield Town to play in the third round of the EFL Cup. Now, against Huddersfield Town, you can't field any team. Your Manchester City, you can go for your number 2 goalkeeper. I believe in the long run, it's going to be Gianluigi Donnarumma, who's going to be the number 1. So in that kind of game, James Trafford would start, and all the other players that do not often get to start. And Manchester City should be able to win that one. And then after that, they will play Burnley at home at the Etihad Stadium before they play again in the UEFA Champions League, which will be on October 1st, away to Monaco. After that, they will play Brentford away from home on the 5th of October, and then we will have a break we'll go for the international break. When we return from the October international break, their games will be at home against Everton, then away from home against Villarreal, away to Aston Villa, at home against Bournemouth, away to Dortmund, and then they will play Liverpool on the 8th November. So you can see that in terms of profile of games, the ones after the October international break will be slightly more easier games because when you have Everton, you have Villarreal, you have Aston Villa, Bournemouth, those are manageable games. We know that I think Bournemouth was one of the teams that beat up against Manchester City last season. So, it won't be too easy. But particularly now, you look at that run of fixtures where they have Manchester United, Napoli, Arsenal, Huddersfield Town, and Burnley, as well as Monaco and Brentford. Especially those first 3 games immediately after the international break. Man United, Napoli, and Arsenal are not going to be easy games. In any case, Arsenal are going to be desperate to win that game against Manchester City because it's a home game at the Emirates Stadium too. They just lost to Liverpool, away to Liverpool by 0-0. While they do return, when they do return, asking themselves, I think they have a date against Nottingham Forest when they return. Then they will have a fixture away from home against Athletic Bilbao in the UEFA Champions League, and then they will return home to play Manchester City. So they themselves are going to have their own bit of trouble or their own difficulty of fixtures. But for Manchester City, a lot needs to be done. Now, okay, Manchester City also changed their coaching staff. We know that people like Pep Linares have come in, people like Habib Koro Toure have come in to help Pep Guardiola, organize that team, train that team, coach that team, and some of their ideas, for which Pep Guardiola must be open to or is being open to try and adopt, are not going to click just quite instantly. But we will see in the long run. But Man City could be in for a long season. That's why, in my personal view, I did predict them to finish 4th on the Premier League table behind Chelsea, with Liverpool in 2nd and Arsenal as champions. Now, I know some people do disagree with that, but it is what it is. Anyways, guys, I do have an interview coming up. Hopefully, it's going to be a big interview with one of the traditional sports analysts or pundits or whichever you may want to call them. Aldrin Soga, a senior. If all goes well, we will be doing that interview quite soon, possibly tomorrow. If all goes well, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. So many things I think we can discuss for the Premier League, for Ugandan football. For example, when it comes to the Uganda Premier League, when it comes to the World Cup qualifiers, for which Uganda Cranes do return to action, I think on Monday. If they do return to action on Monday against Somalia, you do look at then we'll look at the Premier League. He's a Liverpool fan. We'll look at whether Liverpool can defend their Premier League crown. What will be their chances in the UEFA Champions League given the kind of squad that they have? Does Arne Slot have more pressure? In my opinion, he has more pressure given how well revamped his squad has been and things like that. But anyways, all that notwithstanding, we shall be looking forward to that interview. Let me hope that we can be able to achieve it in the coming days if all goes well. If it doesn't happen, that will be the fate that God may have decided for us. But for me, that's my overlook at this Manchester City side that continue under to be a review. I'm losing 2 games in the opening 3 fixtures for a team of Manchester City's caliber and stature and standard is something to be concerned about. However, it's not one that should be worrying you to the guts, because we know teams can have bad stats and bounce back. I often give the example when you go back to that Arsenal team for the 2021-2022 campaign. I remember they lost the opening 3 fixtures against Manchester City, against Chelsea, and against Brentford, and they were bottom of the league. Had conceded about 9 goals, had not scored a single goal in the opening 3 fixtures, and people were asking for Mikel Arteta's head on the spike. And I think the subsequent game, was it against Southampton, which they won by a goal to nil? I do not know for sure, but I stand to be corrected on that one. But I remember, I think they won it by a goal to nil, which wasn't very convincing in any case. But then that was the start, their upward trajectory. They ended up finishing 5th on the Premier League table. I think missing out on the UEFA Champions League slot by just a whisker, with Tottenham Hotspur clinching it. And when they finished with 71 points in 4th place, while Arsenal, I think, came 3rd with 70 points. So if you're a Manchester City fan, I do not be so worried about your recent performances. You can always bounce back. If there's any manager that we can ask to, reinvigorate that Manchester City team, it's going to be Pep Guardiola. His bosses I'm sure they're going to become. But let's wait and see. But it's going to continue to be a very, very difficult start for Man City, because out of the next 3 games, I do not see how they win 3 out of 3. Are they capable of winning 3 out of 3? Obviously, but I do not see them doing it. I see them stumbling. Maybe they beat Manchester United. Maybe it's a draw. They host Napoli. It's another difficult one. Maybe they share the spoils. Maybe they even lose. Then they make the trip to Arsenal. Last season, they lost by 5-1 against Arsenal. So can they avoid that? Hopefully. But that's the brief from me. What more can we say about Manchester City? Because I think we've covered all bases in terms of their incomings, in terms of their outgoings as well. Of course, some of the outgoings are some of those that shouldn't really concern you. For example, Jan Couto, who left for Dortmund. I mean, I'm sure not many of you know him. James McAtee had yet to be a regular starter in that Manchester City team. Ilkay Gundogan left for Galatasaray. Maybe the player I needed to confirm is Manel Akanji. A lot of teams, including Crystal Palace, were really, really interested in his services. Yes, he did move to Inter Milan. So although for many deal sheets, that deal is not being bought. Anyways, away from Manchester City, yesterday the Uganda Cranes put Mozambique into the sword in the FIFA World Cup qualifiers when they beat them by 4-0 at Nambole Stadium. That's the Mandela National Stadium, Nambole. Today, Rwanda in action up against Nigeria. So those fixtures should be coming your way. Morocco put 5 against Niger. By halftime, that game was 2-0. Then you had Ivory Coast beating up against Burundi by goal to nil. Egypt beat Ethiopia by 2 goals to nil, while Senegal beat Sudan by 2 goals to nil. Mauritania beat Togo, while Burkina Faso put 6 past Djibouti. South Africa managed to beat Lesotho by 3 goals to nil. Tanzania shared the spoils with Congo, while Benin beat up against Zimbabwe by goal to nil. Like I said, Uganda beating Mozambique by 4 goals to nil. I mean, what a performance. Alan Okello with a brilliant day in office, scoring in the 48th minute to break the deadlock with a sumptuous strike, one from, long range strike from about 23 yards outside to score. And then you had Rogers Matovo scoring a brace on the day, one being the color that made it 2, and then he scored again what was a bit of a scrappy goal, or ball is fumbled in the area and he latches onto it and scores to make it 3-0. And then Elio Capradosi, the defender, whose father is of Italian descent, did score a header in the 90th minute to ensure that Uganda Cranes, win that game. Uganda Cranes had a very decent starting 11. We did see the return of Salim Jamal Magola in the Uganda Cranes, goalposts. I mean, he has not been to the team in the last I don't know how many years he had been cast out of the team. Elvis Bomono didn't have the best of performances, but Obita, I thought Obita had a good day in office. Aziz Kayondo had a good day in office. Samuel Semakula and Kalida Uche in that midfield. Judse Mugari, Alan Okello, and Rogers Mato were the other starters alongside Stephen Mokwara, who did not have the best of games on that side. So, but anyways, you had Travis Mutiaba come on, Joseph Mpande. I don't know why Wigan Mpande is one of those that I hoped that would make this, but he did not make it. But anyways, it is what it is. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much, Shimal, for being part of this morning's podcast. Thank you so much, LFC, and every single one of you that has managed to be part of our broadcast today. I wish you the very best of the weekend. It's going to be a bit of a dull weekend given that there's no league football, but yeah, don't worry. It will end soon and we'll get back to action as soon as possible. Otherwise, have yourselves a blessed day and the rest of the weekend. Bye-bye for now.